Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hogue, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
Hi, I'm AJ Hogue, the author of Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. Improve your English speaking. Speak powerfully. Speak fluently. Train your English with me, with my VIP program. Join my VIP program at effortlessenglishclub.com. effortlessenglishclub.com. Welcome, Book Club today. Book Club show continuing with Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. We're live on Facebook tonight. Hi, everybody joining. So, as always, Facebook Live viewers, relax for a little bit. As always, I'm going to first explain our book, explain the chapter. I'll explain the key vocabulary. I'll explain the key ideas, the important ideas. Then I'll give my comments, my own personal comments. And then I'll come to your questions and to your comments. So just be patient. Some of you guys get a little impatient. Oh, I want to talk now. I want my comment now. I have my question now. Just relax. I'll get to it. So just relax. Those of you watching live. And lots of love to you all. You're seeing a lot of familiar names. A lot of the same people joining as always. So we have our core audience, our main audience. So I appreciate you, especially those of you who are watching live, again and again and again, and asking really good questions. Some of you guys just always asking good questions, lots of good questions. I often am reading questions from some of the same people again and again and again in different shows because you're asking such great questions. They're connected to the topic. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And also thank you everybody saying hello from your various countries. So let's get started with the show now, and I'll come back to your questions and comments at the end. All right, here we go. Chapter 4 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. The title of this chapter, The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations, Companies. The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations, the power of taxes. Connected to the power of companies or corporations. Taxes and corporations is what this chapter is about. Let's learn about that. That sounds like an interesting topic. He begins, my rich dad played the game smart. He did it through corporations. The biggest secret of the rich. The biggest secret of the rich. I think we should probably really focus on that statement because that's a big statement. Corporations are the biggest secret of the rich. We should probably learn about this. He's telling us, once again, another very important point, that if we want to be rich, we need to understand corporations, and as you will see later in the chapter, we need to know how to use corporations ourselves. So he talks about first the history of taxes. How did taxes start? And he notes that, in the past there was no income tax. No income tax. None. Zero. Zero income tax. And that the income tax developed with a kind of Robin Hood fantasy. Robin Hood fantasy. You guys know Robin Hood, right? And the Robin Hood fantasy is that we'll take money from the rich and give it to the poor. Steal from the rich, give to the poor. That's the Robin Hood fantasy. And he says that the Robin Hood fantasy is the reason income taxes started, and that the Robin Hood fantasy did not work. It did not work. In fact, it backfired. We say it hurt the people it was supposed to help. That, in fact, the Robin Hood idea, the income tax, actually has hurt the middle class the most and has hurt the poor as well, and not the rich. And he says this often happens in history when we look at it, that they'll try to do this, they'll try to tax the rich, steal from the rich, but in the end, usually the rich are too smart and they win. And it's the middle class that suffers. So he gives a short, very, very short summary of income tax in England and the United States. England, 1874, the income tax started, and in America, it was 1913. A terrible day in American history. So he says what happened is that in the beginning, they only taxed the very rich. This is how they sold the idea. This is how they got everyone to vote for it. This tactic is still used today, all the time. It's the rich people will pay. Don't worry. If we're going to pass this law, we're going to pass this tax, it will only hurt the rich. Everybody else, no problem. Right? That's how they always sell the idea and make it popular. But then what happens every time? What happens every time is the rich figure out how to go around the law. They have lawyers. They can pay to get other laws passed so that the law is changed a little bit. They have lots of managers and employees all figuring out ways to avoid these laws. So what happens is these laws, they say, oh, it's going to hurt the rich. But in fact, almost always, it's the middle class and the poor that end up paying, that finally pay. They're the ones who always end up paying the most. And that is exactly what happened with the income tax. That it is now the middle class pays almost all of the income tax. It's the middle class that it gets hurt, and the poor as well. The rich don't pay much, and they pay far less income tax than the middle class. Now, how is that possible? He says it's because the rich know about corporations. The rich know about corporations. That's how they avoid, legally, much or most of the income taxes. And why, in fact, they pay much, much, much less tax than middle class and poor people as a percent. So he said, his comment on the next page is, the rich outsmarted the intellectuals. Right? The rich were smarter than the smart people who were trying to steal from them. So he says, next he talks about corporations. How does this work exactly? And he says, he's American, so he's talking about the United States, but this situation is similar in most countries with income tax. And the income tax rate so the first way they avoid it is the income tax rate of a corporation is less than the individual income tax rate. So that's the first secret of a company, of a corporation, which is a certain kind of company. A corporation generally, certainly in the United States and in many, many countries, a corporation has a lower tax rate, right? A lower percentage for their tax compared to a normal individual person who's working a job. The second way, and this is a big one, the second way that corporations pay less tax is that their expenses are not taxed. We'll talk a little more specifically why this is important, and I'll explain it better in a minute. Then he just gives a few examples from his own life. He says, for example, it's possible in real estate that to pay no tax sometimes. So he says real estate, especially in the United States, has a fantastic tax advantage. A great tax advantage. Next, he writes about his early life in 1974. He was an employee working for Xerox. So he gives a little story about how did he become financially free. He gives us a little more details now in this next section. He was working for Xerox, a big company. And he was a salesman. He was selling. And he decided he was tired of being an employee. He didn't want to be an employee anymore. And he also realized that as an employee, he was paying a big amount of tax, income tax, Social Security tax. So he was getting tired of paying so much. He was watching a big piece of his income taken by the government every paycheck, every single paycheck. So he decided to start a business, and he, as we talked about before, Robert Kiyosaki likes real estate. He started a real estate business. So what he did, as he made money at his job selling at Xerox, he lived cheaply and he used all of his extra money to buy real estate and then rent it. So he would buy a house, fix it, then rent it to someone. Then he got more money, he would buy another house, fix it, and rent it to someone else. And he just kept doing this. And he said, in less than 3 years, I was making more money from my real estate company than from Xerox, than from his job. So it took him about 3 years. In 3 years, he bought enough real estate. He had a real estate company charging renting to people. Lots of different houses, maybe apartment buildings too. And in 3 years, the money from his own company, his real estate company, was more than his paycheck. At this point, he was financially free. Now, he was young, so since he still had a job, he was still working his job, he went out and bought a luxury. He bought a Porsche, a nice luxury car. And he used the money from his company. He only used the money from his company. He did not use the money from his paycheck. Everybody thought, at his job, they thought he was using his paycheck to buy the Porsche, the nice car. But he didn't. And here's what's kind of interesting too, is he bought it with his company. So it was a company car. He made it a company car. So it was a business expense, which means the money he paid for that car was subtracted from his company income. It means he didn't pay taxes on that income. On that amount of money, the cost of the car, it reduced his income tax. So he buys himself a luxury car, and he also reduced his tax at the same time. That's one of the big powers of corporations, that you get to spend the money first, then you're taxed on what's left afterwards. As an individual, an employee, you are taxed immediately, and then you buy things. It makes a big difference. So then he has a little, next section, he has a little summary. He talks about 4 areas that you must be good at, 4 skills, 4 areas of knowledge that you need to learn to be financially free. 4 areas where you need to learn how to do them well, to be kind of an expert, not a super expert, but you need to be good at these books. Be good at these skills, Number 1, accounting, which is kind of what he's teaching us about assets and liabilities. You don't need to be an accountant. Okay, it's not necessary to train as an accountant. That's not necessary. But you need to have a basic understanding of accounting. Assets, liabilities, income, expenses, the things he taught us in the last chapter. That's number 1, accounting. So we've learned that. Number 2, investing, how to make money with money. Number 3, important skill, understanding markets. Understand supply and demand. And number 4, the law. The law. You need to understand especially tax laws and business laws, financial laws. Because if you understand them, you can reduce your taxes a lot. Okay, next section. This is where he starts to get more specific, to be more specific. Now, again, he's talking about American tax laws, but many of these laws are the same or similar in many, many, many different countries. So, of course, that's why he says you need to understand the law. You have to understand the law in your own country because they're different. Even in America, they're even different in each state. So you have to understand that too. So here's the big advantage of a corporation. Okay, this is the really big advantage. You pay your expenses before taxes. You pay your expenses before taxes. A company does. A company pays expenses first, tax second. Employees they get their money and it's taxed immediately. Then they try to live on what's left. So let's give an example. He gives a couple examples here as a corporation. For example, by owning your own corporation, your vacations can be board meetings in Hawaii. You can make a business trip to Hawaii, and then part of your trip to Hawaii becomes a business trip, which reduces your tax. Your car payments and your insurance, you can make the car a company car. Your car insurance can be a company insurance. Many of the things you buy a computer, you buy a cell phone, you have an internet connection. All of these can become business expenses that reduce your taxes. And it's all legal. Some of your meals at restaurants can become business meals, which again reduces your income, your taxes. So let's use the computer as an example to help you understand this. Compare a company and an individual. So an individual, an employee, say just you, right? Let's say you're an employee and you make $10,000 per year, $10,000 per year. So you're broke. Make $10,000 a year and you want to buy a computer. So you buy a computer for $1,000. Okay? When you pay your taxes, your income taxes, you are taxed on $10,000. Your income, your official income is $10,000. And let's say you have to pay, 50% tax. So your tax will be $5,000. Right? And then what's left, you'll have $5,000 left, then you'll buy your computer. Now you have $4,000 left. For a company, it's different. For a company, first you can buy the computer. So let's say the company makes $10,000 a year. The company makes $10,000, buys the computer, $9,000, and then is taxed on what's left. So the income that the company is taxed on is $9,000. Right? They only report to the government 9,000, not 10. They get to subtract what they spend first. And even if they have the same exact tax rate, which they don't usually, but even if they do, now at half, be $4,500. They would have $500 more left after taxes, even though the income was the same, the computer cost the same, but the company would keep more money, because the company would pay less tax. Now, that's only a very simple example of just one expense, but imagine all of these other expenses. Travel expenses, computer, cell phone, some of your meals, on and on and on and on and on. Makes a big, big difference. Suddenly, the company, even if the tax rate was the same percentage, the company will pay much less because the company spends the money first and then is taxed on the smaller amount that's left after. The employee must immediately pay the tax and then use what's left to buy things. You may not realize it, but that is a big, big, big difference. It will make a huge difference. And this is why the actual tax rate for companies, for corporations, is actually much, much, much less. Much less even than what you see in the law. It might say 50%, but they're not telling you that that's after the expenses. So the tax rate on their actual full income is much less. than for a normal person, an employee. This is why corporations are so important. And so that's the end of the chapter. And basically he says you need to learn about this, and you should create your own company. That's what he's saying. You need to create your own company, create your own corporation. So when you do, let's say you do real estate, don't do it as an individual. You need to create a company, a real estate company, and then you do it. Then you go out and you buy real estate and rent real estate, and you have a real estate business. And of course, eventually you want to hire accountants and experts to help you with these taxes. The tax law can be very complicated, but overall, it will reduce your taxes by a lot. You'll have more actual income at the end of the year if you create a corporation than if you're just an individual. And this is true. I've seen this in my own life for sure, that it's all legal, 100% legal. The government encourages this. The government encourages it. In fact, let's listen to a really quick, here's Robert Kiyosaki talking a little more about this. This is a interview with Robert Kiyosaki. I'll just play a few seconds and then we'll talk a little more about it. Here we go.
Employees pay about 50% in tax. So when you say to a kid, go to school and get a job, they're going to pay 50% of what they earn to the government. Not that smart. So, if S stands for smart, like doctors and lawyers and accountants, self-employed, they really get screwed. 60%. So all you A students out there, congratulations. A lot of this is covered in A students, work for B students. And B students pay 20%. Why? Because B...
Okay, so he's saying, now of course he's using kind of an American example, but the idea is true in most countries, that these quadrants, these little squares he's showing on the video, one's employee, one's called self-employed, like lawyers and doctors. That's on the left side. They pay the highest taxes, 50%, 60% of their income as taxes, which is super high. And now he's using American numbers. He's adding there are many different taxes. There's so many different taxes. It's the federal, which means the national government's income tax, the state government's income tax, Social Security tax, unemployment, Medicare, which is a kind of medical, medical care, medical insurance type tax. I mean, when you add them all up, it ends up being about 50% for, let's say, the average middle class employee. Now, on the other side, he said B students meaning business. He's talking about business owners, corporations, pay only about 20% of their total income gets paid to taxes. That's a big difference. One's paying 50% of their full income in taxes, 50 to 60%. And then with the corporations, the business owners, investors, they're only paying 20%. Now, these numbers will change. They can change quite a lot depending on the details, depending on the locations, all of these things. But the general idea is that normal people, you probably, employees, pay much, much higher taxes than corporations and business owners. That's true. I can tell you this is absolutely true because I know my own taxes, and I know it's absolutely 100% true. So, chapter 4 then, to finish chapter 4, the point being, if you want to be rich, you need to learn about corporations and how to create your own corporation. Now, it's actually not so difficult. Again, I only know the United States. Maybe some countries it's more difficult, possibly. But in America, it's really easy. You just file some paperwork and you pay a little bit of money, a few $100s maybe, and then you have a corporation. That's all. It's not that complicated. Now, of course, there are different kinds of corporations you can create. Some of them can be quite complicated if it's a large, complicated one. But they're usually, at least, like I said, in the United States, I know for sure that it's fairly simple to form a corporation. And it will save you a huge amount of money over several years, over your whole life. So it's worth doing. All right. Now it's time for questions and comments. I'll give our live viewers a few minutes to type their questions and comments now. So viewers, go ahead. Now's the time. Type in your questions or comments about Chapter 4, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The power of corporations. And I'll make a comment about this too. It's really common to see, online you can see it, even just when you talk to people complaining about, corporations, those evil corporations, right? Because people kind of do understand that these corporations are making tons of money, especially the really, really, really big ones, the billion-dollar corporations. And we know they're doing lots of bad stuff, and we just kind of know they're not really paying their fair amount. By fair amount, I mean they're making more but paying less. But guess what? That's the world. That's how it works. So what Kiyosaki's saying is be smart. Be smart. Use this. Use the laws to your advantage. Do what the rich do. The rich are smart, right? The rich don't just, when they pass laws trying to steal money from the rich don't just surrender. They don't just do nothing. No, they plan, they strategize, they work, they get together with each other, and they find a way around it. Corporations are one of the big ways. So he's saying if you want to be rich, you need to use these laws to your advantage. You need to understand these general tax laws, these general strategies, this general idea, and use it for yourself instead of it being used against you. Manuel, always with the good questions. So let's talk about this. Got a question. What's wrong with most people? Even if they're making a good living from their own business, they still look at other people who are rich, like soccer players or actors, and make themselves unhappy. Well, they're fools. They're idiots. I don't know why they do it. Envy, jealousy and envy is a powerful thing. You will always be miserable if you do this, right? Because there will always be someone richer than you. Always. Even the person at the very top, I think it's Jeff Bezos right now, the Amazon owner, is at the top. He won't be at the top forever. Somebody will pass him eventually as the richest man in the world. Bill Gates used to be the richest man in the world. Now he's not. So the point is, if you think you're going to be happy by beating everybody else, being richer than them, or if you make yourself unhappy because some other people have more than you, you're always going to be unhappy. You'll always be unhappy. You'll never be at the top. You'll never be the richest person. I'm pretty sure that the people listening to this podcast, probably none of you will ever be the richest person in the world. Since there can only be one, the chances are I'm right. None of us will ever be number one at the top. Therefore, there will always be someone above you with more money. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to get jealous about that. It's stupid. Come on. Who cares what a bunch of soccer players? Think about those soccer players. They have a short career. They can only play soccer professionally at that level for 10 years? Most of them. Maybe a few lucky ones until they're 35 or something. I know, for example, in American football, there may be a couple, one or two professional players that make it to 40. Very, very few. survive and can continue playing until 40. And then they're out. They have no choice. They're done. Okay, so most of them, I think I saw for the NFL, the American Professional Football League, the average length of career playing at that level is only, I think it's 3 or 4 years. So a few superstars, maybe they can play, 10 years or something, 12 for very few. But most only last 3 or 4 years. So, okay, they're making $1 million a year, but they only played 3 or 4 years, $3 or $4 million. Then they're supposed to survive on that money for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Well, if they're spending lots of money, which a lot of them do, that money can be gone very fast. And then they're back to being poor again. So there's no reason to envy these people. And of course, a few of them do make tons of money, like Messi or, Ronaldo, Neymar, those big guys. But so what? Who cares? Well, why would you focus on them? You don't know anything about them. They might be completely unhappy, or the other hand, they might be super happy. What's wrong with that? Why is that a problem? They're really good players. They worked very hard to be good. I guarantee to be those top players, they have to work very hard. So if they're happy and rich, so what? Good for them. Good for them. Okay. In Egypt, work smart and you'll get lots of money. Well, not just Egypt. It's kind of everywhere, Muhammad says, but this is the idea. This is what Robert Kiyosaki is trying to say. Okay, you just gave a summary of his whole book. One of the key ideas that Robert Kiyosaki is saying is that you have to work hard. You have to learn a lot, but working smarter is more important than working harder. If you can do both, that's how you become rich. Just working hard only working harder is not enough. Working hard is good. Okay, I'm not saying that. Laziness is not good. Working hard is very good. But you have to work hard in a smart way. Okay? Work hard in a smart way is what he's saying. You have to understand the laws. You have to understand the markets. You have to understand these business skills. You have to understand these accounting ideas. You have to understand these investing ideas. And you learn them. You got to read about them, and you learn them also by practicing and doing. So that when you work hard, you're working hard in a smart way that helps you build assets. Right? So this is, like he says, two people, they're both working hard, making $100,000 a year. They're both making the same income, $100,000. They're hard workers, both of them. One of them uses their extra money just to buy their own house, to buy a nice car, to buy nice clothes. The other one uses their extra money to buy assets. They create a real estate business, for example. This one's working smarter. They're both working hard, but that one's working smarter. And the smart one will be the one who becomes rich. And by rich, we mean financially free. Financially free. That's all. It just means you don't have to work for someone else. You're not a wage slave anymore. That's what we mean when we say rich. It doesn't mean you're a billionaire. Maybe you'd be a billionaire. It's not really about a specific amount of money. It's about freedom. It's about freedom. So work smart. Absolutely. Trying to figure out what Sonia here is saying. When I have a plan like that, how can I satisfy them to work with me for the purpose of corporate? I'll come back. Sonia, if you could explain your question a little more, I'll be happy to answer it. Can you be happy to? Okay, so Neha's saying, can you explain how we can work in a smart way? Well, yeah, what I just said. You've got to buy assets. You got to create a business, create some kind of business. Now, they're kind of two kinds of businesses. There are two kinds of businesses, my friend. There's two kinds of businesses. I think this is just my idea. There's sort of, I would say, kind of a real estate type, investing type of business, and then what I would call like a entrepreneur business, where you're selling products or a service or services. And the reason I mean, they're both businesses, but the reason I sort of separate them is they're very different. They're kind of, I think, different kind of people enjoy these. I like the business, the product, the business type with products and services, entrepreneur type thing. That's what I like. I've been talking a lot about that, but I have to be careful because just because I like it doesn't mean it's best for everyone. And I realize that a lot of people don't like that. Doesn't fit for them. And for those people, maybe real estate's better. Real estate is just, you're buying houses or apartments or buildings and you're renting them to people. That's it. Pretty simple. You need to learn the laws. You have to learn the skills. Of course, there's lots to learn still, but that's basically how you do it. So you do one of those two things, and when either one of these, you do it with a corporation. You create a corporation, a company, and the company buys the real estate and rents it, or the company sells the product or services. You don't do it as an individual. Now, in the very beginning, when you're starting small, you've got just maybe a couple $100, everything's super tiny, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be a company. When I started Effortless English, it was basically just me. It was not a corporation. But after just a couple months, as soon as I got enough income, I changed to a corporation. But in the very beginning, I didn't, just because I didn't want to spend the money. I said it costs money to create a company. So if you don't have that in the beginning, just start the business and start making money first. Then the income from the business can pay for the legal cost of the paperwork to change it into a company, a corporation. Okay. Ozma's asking, I learn English. Oh, no, actually not asking, just saying. I learn English to improve my skills to get the best job. That's good. Improve your skills for sure. Okay. All right, this is a long comment, but I'll see if I can read through it. Okay, big long comment. Hi, AJ. I really want to learn basic stuff about accounting, law, taxes. Just the basics. Good. It's not easy to study on my own because there are thousands of books. There are. That's the good news. Lots of stuff to read, and I don't know which of them are helpful. So I'm thinking about joining some short courses, less than 6 months, from school or private center. Then I'll read more books. What do you think about that? Just be careful. I'm a bigger fan of independent learning. I know, because you can learn so much faster from reading yourself than taking a course. And then you have to be careful. Is the person who's giving the course, do they really know what they're doing or not? I don't know. A lot of times the courses, I just feel like they waste so much time. In 6 months, you could read so many books about these topics that you might, in 6 months, you might know the same amount as the teacher, or certainly enough. So, do what you want to do, but I highly encourage you just to pick some books and read them. Don't worry about which one's the right one, which one's the wrong one. Read a few of them, and then you'll find you'll find which one fits you better. You'll find which book, explains better. Some writers just fit you better, right? So sometimes you might get a book about accounting and you're like, oh, this is so confusing. I don't understand it. So then you get another book written by someone else and it's much better. Like the Robert Kiyosaki stuff about accounting is really good. It's very, 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 very simple. So that's one reason I like him. But, of course, decide for yourself, but I would encourage you, even if you take the classes, don't be passive. Still actively find things and read yourself, and then use the class to ask questions. The advantage, the good point about a teacher is you can ask questions. Or just make sure you find a really good teacher. That helps too. Yeah, Carol's exactly right about this. This is the other problem. So this is why the middle class suffers so much. People who don't work in France are protected, so protected they sometimes get money from the government for doing nothing. Yeah, right. America too. And that means they're not motivated to go to work, right? Because we're paying for them. But the less people who work, then the people who are working, right, the actual workers have to pay even more taxes because more and more people just take money from the government for free, which means the middle class has to pay more and more because the rich will avoid most of these taxes. So who actually pays? It's the middle class. It's the normal people just working their normal jobs, get higher and higher and higher and higher taxes. They got to work harder and harder and harder for less and less and less. The rich avoid the taxes. Many of the poor just get free stuff, and they're lazy. So the middle class is being attacked. Okay, the income tax is basically an attack on the middle class. Now, the good news or bad news, it depends on how you look at it, is this won't go forever because, France, I know, and many other countries, they have a huge amount of debt, the United States too. This party the poor are having is going to end. And when it ends, those people are really going to suffer. They are going to suffer a lot because all this free money is going to stop. And when it stops, what will they do? They're going to suffer tremendously because they're so used to not working and being lazy and just being everyone just giving stuff to them. It doesn't last forever. If you want to find out what's going to happen, it's going to be Venezuela. Look at Venezuela. Okay, now Venezuela, it happened very fast because they went basically full communist, so everything happened much faster. In Europe and the United States, first of all, Europe and the United States are much richer countries, so this craziness could go longer. The second thing is that Europe and the United States did not go 100% communist. They went sort of socialist, right? Partially communist, although it's getting worse and worse. But it's kind of a slow version of Venezuela over a longer time. Now, America controls the world banking system, so it's been very slow, but it's the same path that Venezuela is following now. And if you see what's happening there, the poor are, they're starving, they're trying to get out of the country, they're suffering like crazy, massive crime, violence. It's terrible. I mean, it's sad, but and on the other hand, it's not sad because they deserve it. They voted for that. They were idiots. Okay, could you please speak on the recommended strategies, techniques about English teaching as a teacher? Okay, here's an English question. Okay, could you please speak... Okay, this is an English question. I'll answer it, though. Mazarat asks, could you please speak about your recommended strategies, techniques, methods about English teaching as a teacher? My quick answer for anybody who's a teacher is get the book by Blaine Ray. Blaine Ray, R-A-Y. He has an excellent book for teachers, teacher training. It's called TPR Storytelling. TPR Storytelling by Blaine Ray. It's a great book. That's too big of a question for me to answer right now. So just get the book. It's a great book. He's a very, very, very good teacher trainer. Okay, well, here's another super long one. 50%, as far as I know, the fault rate is, so over 50% of businesses fail. Yep, they do. I think it's maybe varies by country, but yes. Most businesses, I think it's more than 50% of new businesses fail in a year, maybe? Something like that. I can't remember the statistics, but it's not a good one. But it's very dangerous to start a business and give up your professional job just to have a free life without a boss, but any of us can face serious problems. The big problem is that private business will be working more or less. Okay, here's the thing. Exactly, but you don't do that. As I said before, you don't just, people get scared of starting a business because they have this idea, I will quit my job, and then I'll have a little bit of money, and I'll start the business, and then I will pray that it survives. And if it doesn't survive, then I'll have no money at all, and then I'll starve. Well, that's a crazy way to do it. That is foolish. That's a big foolish risk. That's not what you do. Not what you do. Okay? What you do is just what Robert Kiyosaki, we just read about it in this chapter. He had a job. He was a salesman at Xerox. He was making decent money. And he was also living cheaply. So he took all his extra money and he created his real estate business, and he started buying real estate and renting it while still working his job at the same time. And he slowly grew his business, built it up bigger, until it took him 3 years. 3 years later, his business was making more money than his job. Then he quit his job. See, that's the smart way to do it. No risk. Zero risk, really. Might lose some of your money, but there's really no risk, right? If the business had failed, he still had his job, so no big deal. No problem at all. That's what you do. When I started Effortless English, I was living super cheaply, very super cheap, so I only needed a part-time job. I was working a part-time job. I started Effortless English at the same time. I did not immediately quit my job. I kept my job. I worked my job half-time, part-time job. And then my free time, I created lessons. I created a website. I built my business. My business, for me, it was very fast. So in a few months, my business was making more than my income at my job. I quit my job. So it's really not that big of a risk, actually. I don't think it's a big risk at all. I think it's a very, very tiny risk if you're smart about it. Almost zero risk, actually. And again, as you cut your expenses, the more cheaply you live, when you get down to that baseline, your risks become, again, super small. If you're living in a tiny apartment and let's say your expenses are only $500 per month, everything, food, apartment, everything, you're super cheaply living, you don't have to be afraid of much. Why? Because you can go get any job. You could quit your nice job. You could quit your expensive job and try a business. And then if it fails, what do? Starve to death? No, you just go get another job. It's not that big a deal. And because your expenses are low, maybe you need a job fast, right? Oh, I got to get a job so I don't starve to death. So you run and you just get a job at a convenience store. You get a job at a fast food, anything. You just find some cheap job just to survive. And then while you have that cheap job to survive, then you can be looking for a nicer job if you want to. So that's the risk. It's not that big a risk. I don't know. This idea that you're going to, your business will fail and then you're going to die is crazy. And the truth is too, like Carol said, in a lot of countries, many countries, they have different kinds of welfare. So even if you lose your job and you have no money, you still won't starve because the government will give you some money for food. So the risks, people in their mind, they make the risk really big, but the risk and the fears become bigger, and they make the fear, and they start imagining all these terrible things. But if you're just a little bit smart, the risks are actually very small, and therefore the fear should be small. Yeah, and Bari, no, you don't need to apologize. It's a good comment. Okay. This is a good comment because it's a good point I want to bring up because this is something that stops a lot of people. Waleed, I have a good idea for a business. That's about 5% of it. But I can't find an investor. How can I get an investor? Don't. Look, if you have no experience, you're not going to get an investor. If you have to ask me that question, you're probably not going to get one. It means you don't know what you're doing, just to be honest. I've said this before, but a good idea is worth about nothing. Okay? Maybe $1. Okay? A good idea, lots of people, before they start a business, they think it's the idea. I've got this genius idea. Well, it's not the idea, okay? It's doing it. It's how you do it. It's every single day doing it. And the business skills of doing it. That's what's important, right? You don't need a good idea. You don't need some genius idea. Robert Kiyosaki didn't have a genius idea. What was his big idea? I'll buy houses and I'll rent them to people. That's not very genius. That's not some crazy, cool, creative idea. Like, it's not new. Lots and lots and lots of people do that. Okay, that's probably one of the most common businesses for thousands and thousands of years. Own a building and rent it to people. So you don't need a super cool idea. It's doing it. It's knowing how to do that to make money, right? Those business skills he talked about, working hard and working smart. So my advice to you, Waleed, is forget that business idea. If you need investors, then it's a bad idea. So move on. Do something else. Do something you can start yourself without an investor. Something smaller. Something much cheaper. Something you can do while you work another job at the same time. So it's low risk. Maybe it would be real estate. I mean, that's one of the reasons Robert Kiyosaki really talks about real estate a lot, because I think it's a kind of business and a kind of investing that a lot of just regular people can do. While still working a job, while still being an employee, this is something that lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people do, is they become landlords, right? They do real estate businesses. Now, I personally don't, because I don't really like it, but it's a lot of people do it. And I think actually for kind of most normal people who are used to working a job, real estate might be the better kind of business. My kind of business scares people. I can tell by the comments that this kind of entrepreneur business scares people. So if you're scared of it, maybe real estate would be better for you. Or maybe even like stock investing or something, investing in stocks and that kind of thing. So, remember, you don't have to start a business. Just because I talk about it, that's only one kind of asset. Remember, Robert Kiyosaki in the early chapters talked about other kinds of assets. Other kinds of assets include real estate, stocks and bonds. And then remember, he also mentioned intellectual property. That's a kind of asset, right? And we gave the example of writing a book that you publish. That's an asset because that book can sell for your whole life to people. People might buy that book for your whole life. And every time someone buys that book, you get a little money. That's also an asset. So see, you don't have to start a company that is an entrepreneurial company. That's the adjective, entrepreneurial. Okay? You don't have to do that kind of company. You can do real estate, you can do stocks and bonds, you could do intellectual property. Especially if you're a kind of a creative person, that might be the best way to do it. So you have a range of things you can do. And also, as he mentioned in this chapter, you can and probably should continue working your job. We have an idiom in English, American English. We say, don't quit your day job. Don't quit your day job, daytime job. Right? It's this exact idea. Someone says, I've got this idea for a company. And sometimes people say it as a joke, don't quit your day job. It means it's a bad idea. But it's actually good advice. Don't quit your job until your business or your assets are giving you enough money to live. Then you certainly can quit your job. But the idea of quitting your job first and then starting a business and hoping, man, of course that's scary. Of course that's more scary. It's a bigger risk. Bari was right about that. It is a bigger risk for that approach. So if, some people, and here's the other thing, there's not one right or wrong answer, okay? Some people are not scared of that risk. Some people are excited about it. They just want to jump in and do it. Hey, if that's you, just go for it. Just do it, okay? But anyone who's scared of risk, keep your job. Don't quit your day job. And Sophiana is basically summing up this. All that matters to succeed is how much of a creative thinker you are. And of course, the way you think out of the box. That's a lot of it is problem solving. Absolutely correct about that. Because a lot of people too, they think they want to start a business or real estate or whatever. And then they start, and then they come against their first problem. Oh, maybe there's some laws there's a bunch of laws and paperwork I have to deal with. Or there's some difficulty. And then they just quit. They just stop. They hit the first problem and then they just stop and quit. You can't do that. You got to get creative. How do I go around this problem? How do I solve it? Do I just work hard to solve this problem? Is there some smarter solution to this problem? Right? You got to get creative then and overcome. You can also, of course, read and do research and find out how other people did it. Okay, there are millions probably of other people who have done all of these things and succeeded. Some of them have written books. So you can learn from all of them. If they did it, you can do it. Okay, Ahmed is asking, what is the first step you need to do to get into the world of business? You just need if you're talking about a business, like an entrepreneur business, you've got to, I think a good way to think about it is you have to solve a problem, or you have to add some value to other people. Do something they want or need, right? So you just identify something and then you do it. So it's very general. You just start. That's all. Excellent question. Kyoswar, I'm sorry about the pronunciation. Can you tell me the pros and cons of partnerships? Mostly cons. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend partnerships, honestly, especially someone who's new, starting business. I recommend you do it yourself. Own it all. Own it all yourself. Now, some people will break this, but that's my personal advice. And I know, yes, there have been successful partnerships, of course, but there are a lot of extra problems come when you own a business with someone else, because it's very unlikely that you will agree on everything. And it's highly likely that you're going to have some big disagreements about some very important things. A lot of people start partnerships. Yeah, let's do this. Okay, they start a partnership, but they don't really understand each other enough, and they don't understand how each other thinks and how each other works. What I have found with most partnerships is that one person is almost always much more motivated than the other one. So one person ends up doing much, much, much more work than the other. And yet, oftentimes, the ownership is 50-50. I'll give you an example from music. The Beatles. Okay? The Beatles had an equal partnership. 4 musicians. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. 4 of them. Each got 25%. John and Paul did most of the work. They created 95% of the hit songs. They wrote probably 95% of the songs, maybe 90. George wrote some good ones. I mean, those 2 guys, no way were they only 50% of the Beatles creatively, and even as a business, financially, right? Those guys were probably 90% together, John and Paul. George did contribute some. He wrote really at the end of the Beatles. In the beginning, he did almost nothing. But in the last few years, George wrote a few good songs, but nothing like John and Paul. And Ringo did nothing at all. He was just a drummer. Was he a great drummer? Not even a great drummer. His drumming skills were okay. I liked Ringo, but we have to be clear, right? If you like the Beatles, he was a nice guy, but he didn't write any songs. He was not a good singer. John and Paul would write a song for him to sing just because he was their friend, but he really was not a very good singer. And he was just a so-so drummer. And yet, he was an equal partner. He still got 25%. He got the same percent as Paul McCartney. He got the same percent as John Lennon. I imagine later, maybe John and Paul thought, wow, we're getting a bad deal, man. We're doing all the work. We created all we wrote all the great songs. We were like the two geniuses, and we got the same percent as the other two guys. Now, the other two guys got a great deal. So, if you're planning to start a business and you're really motivated, you're going to work hard, you're going to work smart, it's dangerous to do a partnership in the beginning because quite likely you will do 90% of the work but only get half of the payment. I'm speaking from experience, by the way. Be careful. I tried this after Effortless English. I tried to do a few partnerships, and honestly, I wasn't really satisfied with any of them. Some of them a little better than others. One I can think of that was quite bad, but overall, I just don't recommend it. Do it yourself. And then hire people. Hey, cool. Excellent. Great. Here's a great example. Straight example. Perfect. Francois. I work in government in Brazil, has a job, and I began a tattoo business in my house. Fantastic. See? This is being creative. And look, it's in his house, so he's keeping his expenses low, right? He didn't go rent some super expensive office somewhere and increase all his expenses. Nope, he kept his expenses exactly the same. He still has his safe income from his government job. He didn't just quit his job and pray that the business would work. So if the business fails, then, he still has his job, no problem. Still has food, his family can still eat and has a place to live. And if his business makes money, well, now that's extra money for him, which he can put that back into the business to grow it, or he could buy other assets. Either way, it's adding to his financial freedom. And if the business expands and grows and grows and grows and eventually becomes very successful, he could quit his job and he could just do the business only. It's all good possibilities. That's perfect. There's an example. I would never even think of that because I don't have tattoos, but there you go. See, you just got to be creative. And I'm guessing almost certainly, he likes tattoos. Maybe tattoos were a hobby of his, or maybe he was a tattoo artist as a hobbyist. I don't know, but I'm just guessing, right? So it's often good to do something that you are interested in. So I'm not interested in tattoos, so I wouldn't do that. But he is, so it's a great thing to do. That's why I can't tell you. Some people ask me, what business is good to start? I don't know what's good for you. I was an English teacher before. I taught English for over 10 years in different countries before I started Effortless English. So I started Effortless English because I already had 10 years of English teaching experience, and I had already developed my own methods for doing it. But so you got to find your own way. They're perfect. See, that's a cool story. Thank you for sharing that comment. And kind of what Maserat's saying here too, good planning, being well prepared and organized is the most important issue in business. Yes. And then start working. Don't be lazy. Yep. And I think the other one that I would add to that is to learn. Okay. So a lot of people think that they have to figure out all the whole business at the beginning. I gotta figure out everything: the marketing plan, the advertising, how the product, the services, the price, and you don't have to figure it all out at the beginning. Again, if you limit your expenses, you have time to learn. You have time to try things and see what works and what doesn't, and you can adjust. You adjust. You keep adjusting. You keep testing and learning, So maybe in the first month, you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then after 6 months, you have learned a lot, and now your business starts to work. So you got to survive long enough to learn. Getting a travel invitation to Uzbekistan, thank you. All right, Alibay again. Hey, how you doing, Alibay? Wondering about, what do you think we can start a business alone? Well, I did, yes. So certainly you can start a business alone. The tattoo business, I don't know, but I would guess that's one you could do alone if you had the skill. If you were a tattoo artist, then you could start that alone. So there are a lot of businesses. If you have the skill, an individual skill, you could certainly start them alone. I have an idea. I'm thinking to create a website regarding shopping. Good. I can write the back end. Even better. I can do the front end myself. Do you think I'd be capable of giving all the needs of the business? Yeah, do it. It's not irrelevant, because that's perfectly relevant, and that is, God, that's fantastic. Do it. Alibay, here's the thing. You say you can do the back end. That means like the programming, the part that the customer does not see. And then there's the front end. That's the design. That's the part the customer does see, the website visitor sees. If you can do both, man, I had to hire people for both of those. So I could not do either one, except really basically. So do it. Now I'm guessing, a lot of web people specialize. Maybe you're good at one, you're really good at one, and the other one you're so-so. But it's okay to save money. Just do both right now. Start the business. Get it going. Get some money coming in. As the business makes money, then eventually you could pay people, employees or just freelancers even, to do one of those if you prefer. If one of those is your favorite and one you don't like them so much. So for example, maybe you're more the back end guy. You really love the programming. So, eventually you could pay designers if you want to redesign your site. You could pay the graphic artists, right, to do that. But if you can do both right now, then it saves you lots of money. And it also, the other cool thing about it is you learn. The more you do yourself, it's difficult, it's a lot of work, but it means you learn all parts of your business first. So I highly recommend this, actually. I did the same thing in the beginning. I was doing everything myself. My first website was super ugly. But as a result, I learned how it worked, at least at the basic level. So later, when I hired people, I had an idea about web design. I had an idea of what works, what doesn't, why it's important. I had an idea about internet marketing. I had an idea even about the back end, some of the programming issues. I couldn't do it myself, but I at least understood the main issues. So I was able to hire people later, and I could be intelligent about hiring. I didn't just need to blindly trust. So this is a good reason to just do as much of it yourself at the beginning. One, you save money, but two, you start learning. It's a faster learning process. And then later, when you're making some money, then you hire people to do the parts you really hate or the parts that you're not good at. So I don't do my web design now. I suck at that. I can't. I pay people now. Oh, we have a monk. Looks like from Thailand, perhaps. Monk Tong, I guess. I want to be good at English. Well, welcome. Guess I can't read Thai, but it looks like Thai to me. It's one of those scripts. So, very honored to have a monk. Thank you for joining. That's another way you could do it. You could become a monk. Yeah, so, okay, Bari, now following up on his comment. I lease a small flat to young tenants. So he's renting out to young people. But I need more flats to have a nice money from this. I will not give up my job until I reach the same income. Exactly. Perfect. Right now, the property prices are very high, and it's going to take too long. Yeah, okay, so it's tricky. I understand that. But you got the right idea, and I think you're smart. Don't quit your job yet. But you're starting, you're on the right path, and sometimes you gotta wait and be patient and wait to get a little lucky, find a good deal, wait until the real estate market changes. I mean, I don't know real estate. I can't give you any specific advice on that, but you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing by not quitting your job. Oh, here's a good comment. Sophian, in some cases, a person does not need an MBA, Master's in Business, from Harvard to set up a successful business. When it comes to gaining money and becoming rich, you have to be different from others. You are correct, but I'm going to change that first phrase. In some cases, I would say, in almost all cases, an MBA from Harvard means nothing to being an entrepreneur. In fact, I think it probably would hurt you. I think getting a master's in business from Harvard would hurt you. It would hurt your chances of success to be an entrepreneur. There probably are some successful entrepreneurs that have Harvard master's degrees, but I doubt there are many. There are lots of them working in huge, big corporations, big companies as employees, but you don't go to college to be an entrepreneur. If you like feel inside your heart, I must be an entrepreneur. That's my destiny. That's what I love. I want to do it. Don't go to college. Just start a business. Don't waste that time and don't waste that money. Here's a very specific English question. When someone says, a friend of mine gave me this, my question is that we don't know if they're male or female. Well, you're right. From that question, a friend of mine gave me this, you don't know if it's a male or female friend. Unlike, say, Spanish, where you would know because they would say amiga or amigo. In English, you don't know. It's a neutral word, so you just ask. Is your friend a male or a female? I'm a t-shirt designer. I'm new in this sector. My targeted audience is in the USA. How can I create new messages for t-shirts? Sufi. That's cool. I just recently talked about t-shirts. I think it was my audio podcast that I talked about. I just gave a random example of starting a business and I mentioned you could design t-shirts. And what do you know? Someone's doing it. Where would you get ideas for t-shirts for Americans? Well, you're asking the wrong person about that. I don't know, but I think a lot of t-shirts, you have to get into the pop culture of America. You have to understand the pop culture a bit. I think a lot of, I don't know, it really, I don't know, because I've seen, that's one thing you could do, pop culture. You could have some little phrase or something from various pop culture, or you just have some cool design that looks really nice. I'm not I don't know. I really have no idea what to tell you for that. No specific examples. You're just going to have to try. My overall idea about, where do you get ideas is you will never know. Actually, let's put that question back up on the screen because it's actually a very good question that we should talk about in a more general way. How can I get ideas for something? How do I know what will work? How do I know what good design, what will be a good design or a good message for a t-shirt? You don't. You have no idea. You will never know. You will never know the answer to that question. In the beginning, you'll never know. How do you find out the answer? You only find out by testing. This is the only way you will ever learn. That's it. So here's what you do. You create 20 designs and you put them all on your website or however you're selling them. You don't make 1,000 of them. You just make a couple, and you put them on your website and you see which ones are popular. Which ones do people buy and request and which ones do people not? Which ones do they ignore? Now you got some actual information from real customers. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Now, the other thing you can do, another way to get a little bit information, which is not as good, that's the best way. The second best way is connect with your possible customers, people who are interested in you, interested in your designs. Connect with them on social media, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram's probably a good one for you It's very visual, t-shirts, designs. And if you don't want to spend money, you again, make your designs. You don't even have to print the shirts, or maybe print one shirt each, and boom, take pictures, post them all on Instagram, and start asking your followers, hey, do you like this one better? Which one do you like better? What do you think of this one? What do you think of this one? Put a little like, put a little heart next to the design, for the design that you like best. And you'll start, again, so you're starting to get feedback, you're getting information from real people who might buy from you, or real people who have already bought from you. So that's how you find out what works and what doesn't. You try a whole lot of things and you test them. That's the best way to find out, not guessing, because you'll never really know. Nobody knows. Even people at the top who are very successful, they do this. Okay, very few people can just predict, oh, I know, I'm going to do this design and it's going to be a bestseller and everyone will love it. Even very, very famous people do that and then they fail. They're totally wrong. So you have to let the market, you have to let real people give you the information and tell you what they like and what they don't like. So try a lot of different things. And this is true not just for t-shirts, but for anything. A lot of people are, what product should I do? What price should I do? What services should I offer? How should I advertise? How should I market? I don't know. And you don't know. And you never will know until you test it. So you try to do cheap tests in the beginning, especially. You try to test all this cheaply. That's one great thing about social media. I'll give you an example, a very easy example. Doesn't cost me money. But sometimes if let's say I'm at home, I want to do an effortless English show, and I guess I can't think of a topic. I don't know what topic. What should I talk about? Oh, I don't know. I'm tired. My brain's not working. I can't think of an idea. You know what I do? I just get on Twitter. Hey, what topic do you want me to talk about in the show? And I put it on Instagram. Suddenly, I've got 50 ideas from you. Talk about this. Talk about this. Talk about pops. Talk about pop culture. Talk about American culture. Talk about this movie. Talk about idioms. Talk about slang. Talk about. I get all these suggestions come in, and then I just pick one, and then I do it. It's really easy. This is one of the great tools of social media for business people and for creativity, is that you don't have to do it all yourself. And it's a great way to test ideas cheaply or for free. And it's a good way to ask for ideas. So I'm using this Sufi's question as a general example that anyone can use. He's asking about t-shirts, but this same idea you can use for almost anything. Any kind of service or business, or where you're not sure, should I do this or this? You test it, you test it, you test it. All right, I'm going to take a couple more, and then I've got to eat. Time for me to go and eat some food. It was saying in Polish, you also would know immediately that question. A friend gave me this. Yeah, a lot of the languages, I didn't know about Polish, but I think a lot of the Romance languages, what we call Romance languages, Latin-based languages have gender. The words have genders. Spanish, it's really easy, very obvious. But English does not have that. All right, let's end with this one because it's such a common thing I'm getting. Alexandre Franco. In your opinion, what's the greatest fear that people have to start their own business? Well, in a general way, it's the fear of failure. That's the very general answer. Fear of failure. And I'm trying to figure out what that is exactly. I'm still trying to figure it out because I'm seeing so much fear when I do these topics. In comments, I can feel the fear. People fear failure. They're afraid to fail. But why? And that's the next question you have to ask yourself. Why? What's so scary about failing? If we think about it, if we just calmly think about it and really think about, well, if my business failed, what would happen? I think in most cases, it's actually not that big a deal. It's not really that big of a risk. You're not going to starve to death. Okay, you'll still have food. if you're a little bit smart about it, right? Like Bari, right? You don't just quit your job and try to start a business with zero money and pray that you immediately are successful. Of course not. Okay, so what is the fear exactly? You know what I think it is, Alexandre? I think it's the fear of the unknown. I think that's why I'm having trouble figuring out what the exact fear is. Because I think maybe a lot of people also don't really know. They're not really thinking about it step by step to the end to see what is it exactly that I'm afraid of. I think it's the fear of the unknown is what is actually scaring people about starting a business. Because, even though we can see that in many ways, being an employee is worse, pay more taxes, you have less freedom, all these things. But it has one actually very good, big benefit, and that is it's predictable. It's more certain, right? If you have a job, well, you know that the company has promised to pay you an exact amount of money at an exact time every month, usually every month, right? Maybe 2 times a month. You're going to get exactly this much. And how do you get that money? Well, they tell you exactly when you need to come. You will come Monday to Friday from 9 to 5, or maybe it's different, but you understand the idea. You'll go from exactly this time, and the company will tell you, what must I do when I'm at the job? You will do exactly this and this and this. They will train you and tell you exactly what you must do. They tell you exactly when you must do it, and then they tell you exactly how much they will pay you when. So it's all very certain. A lot of certainty, right? There's no unknown there. Everything's known, everything's clear. So that's why it's not scary. Now, if you really thought about it more carefully, you might be a little more scared of being an employee. You might realize they could cut your job tomorrow. And they do. They often do. Many people are completely surprised about losing their job very suddenly because the company decides they need to cut some expenses. But people don't think about that. And what they focus on is just that certainty. Okay, I'll get paid on the first day, the first Monday or the first Friday of every month. I know I will get exactly this much money. I know exactly what I must do. It's all very clear. There's no unknown. And then starting your own business, I think the thing that scares people is none of those things are known. When do you have to work? Nobody tells you. You have to figure it out. You have to decide your hours. If you're working a job, then you got to figure out when is my extra time. Nobody tells you how many hours to work. Do I only need to work 5 hours per week when I start my business? Do I need to work 20 hours per week when I start my business? Do I need to work 80 hours a week when I start my business? Don't know. Nobody tells you. You just got to figure it out. And it might change from week to week. It might be different. How much money will you make from your business? No idea. No idea in the beginning. No idea. It might fail, meaning it makes no money or loses a little bit of money. Or it might make $300 one month. But then the next month, is it a guarantee also to make $300? No. The next month might be a really good month. You might make $800. Or the next month might be a bad one and it drops to $100. Again, unknown, no certainty. How do you find customers? Well, there are lots of strategies, but nobody's going to tell you how to do that. Again, you got to figure it out. How much money should you charge? What's the price of your product or your service? Unknown. You don't know. You have to just try it and test it. Nobody will tell you. Who are your best customers? Nobody will tell you. Should you do this product or this product? Nobody will tell you. Like our t-shirt question. Which t-shirt design would be the best one to sell? Nobody tells you. So I think that's what it is that is scaring people. Especially people, because most of us, right? We all get trained in school. It's just like a job. They tell you everything. You must come to class from this time to this time. You go to this class, then this class, then this class. You must read this page, and then you will be tested on this, and then you must write this paper, and then you'll get this grade. Everything, you're told exactly what to do every moment. And then you go to a job, same thing, certainty, and suddenly you start a business. Nobody tells you anything. No idea. You have to make your own decisions about all of this stuff. It can all change every single week or every month. So it's a huge amount of uncertainty, huge amount of unknowns. I think that is right at the middle, at the center of the fear, I believe. And I'm just trying to convince you that actually these things are not so scary. It's true they're unknown, but if you really think about it, nothing terrible is going to happen. You're going to be okay. So the unknown is actually not a scary unknown. It's a pretty safe unknown. And just get in there, and once you, and this is the thing, the other thing I'm trying to tell you is, once you start, if you will just start, then it's not unknown anymore. Now you're doing it. Now it's known. Now you're learning. Now you're getting used to it. Now you're figuring things out. You're learning. You're getting the skills. And these answers will start coming to you. What's the best price? Well, you test 20 prices and you figure out, this is the best price for my product. Once you know that, you don't have to keep asking that question again. Now you know. Right? How do I find my best customers? You're not sure, so you test, and you start figuring it out. Now that's known. Or at least it's mostly known. And also, even with the income, as your business grows and goes longer and longer, you'll have a more clear idea. You can predict it more. Maybe you know, December is a really good month. Usually probably our income goes up. Our sales always go up in December. And you might know, July or June is a bad month for us. It's always slow. It's okay. Then you can plan for it. So fear of the unknown. And all I want to say to you is don't be scared of it. It's not actually that scary. All right, that's all for today. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great evening and a great weekend. I'll be back with another Effortless English show. Remember, if you watch the videos, you're only getting half of this show. So subscribe to my audio podcast. The audio podcast has a lot more. Only audio. So just get a podcasting app. Doesn't matter. iTunes, Podcast Addict, TuneIn, Spotify. Get a podcasting app. They're all free. Search for and subscribe to the Effortless English Podcast. Effortless English Podcast. You get a lot of extra audios. See you next time. As always, join my VIP program at effortlessenglishclub.com. effortlessenglishclub.com.